Hi everyone, it's QuickyBaby and welcome back to World of Tanks, and I'm starting my commentary today a little bit early to highlight one of the most important things you can do once you've managed to get your tank elite and you can waste experience on field mods, and that is to have two builds. In a tank like the T-54 Lightweight, you'll see that I have two builds, one with vents, gun rammer, and an aiming device for when I want to go full aggressive and be able to get as much damage out as I possibly can. And another build, as you can see here, where I'm using a vision system, vents, and an exhaust for when I'm ending up on the sneaky maps. Now, if you're so inclined, you could drop the vents for optics. That's going to give you 7% extra view range, but 3% worse everything else about your tank. It's worth it on some vehicles, I'd say, which play hyper scouts, but on a vehicle like this, which is also more of like a flex pick, it doesn't particularly need the extra view range, although it can come in handy when you want to catch your vehicles, your opponents at greater distances. So today, I'm playing in the infamous T-54 Lightweight. This vehicle blends the light tank and the medium tank gameplay, although I'd say it's definitely still on the light tank side of things rather than the medium tank side of things, as this vehicle has 80mm of frontal hull armor and 180 on the front of the turret. Now, when you get yourself into a nice matchup against tier 7 and tier 8 tanks, that does allow you to be a little bit more aggressive, and more importantly, it allows you to brush aside things like high explosive rounds, although they will still do some damage to you, but they're not going to penetrate like they would do on quite a lot of the other light tanks in the game. However, this vehicle truly is still fast, able to go at 69 kilometers an hour forwards before you take the field mod, which will increase it up to 71, and then, you know, that is a very fast tank that also still weighs 30 tons. Excellent for ramming this vehicle. The only other competition this tank really has at tier 9 for ramming will probably be a Char 75, although the Char 75, while it weighs the same as the T-54 Lightweight, its armor definitely isn't the same. And remember, your armor does protect you from taking damage, although I believe your weight is one of the biggest inputs into how much damage you're going to be dealing with the impact. So yeah, watch out for your Char 75. Great for ramming. A few days ago on stream, I managed to pretty much ram kill an EBR 90 in my Char 75 while I was reloading, and ended up having a bit of a "this is Sparta" moment, pushed them off a cliff to their, well, more of like a 5-meter drop, but luckily they took half their hit points from a 5-meter drop. World of Tanks physics, am I right? So the T-54 Lightweight back in the day used to be tier 8. Like a lot of the light tanks, it was dropped down a tier. And this meant that you could use this in tier 8 tank companies. I used to have so much fun playing tier 8 tank companies with the T-54 Lightweight before it was bumped up to tier 9. And being bumped up to tier 9, it definitely hurt the vehicle a little bit. While its matchmaking was the same, I still feel that at tier 9, you didn't get into these magical matchups where you were one of the, counted as one of the tier 8s. And while you couldn't meet tier 6 tanks, you still could only meet tier 7s. I felt like you just ended up with better template matchmaking than you do now, being a tier 9 tank within that regard. So the T-54 Lightweight, is it a light tank, is it a medium? Well, I've said that it's mostly a light tank, and thank goodness for a map like this. Its camera rating is still 16 while moving, and while that pales in comparison to some of the really sneaky tanks at its tier like the G-Saw, but it's still not bad. Talking about light tanks, I'm going to do something very important to do on Malinovka here, and that is to check to see what the enemy light tank is doing. And yeah, if you drive out very slowly after your 6 sensors reset, you can figure out where the enemy light is. And we can see now that the light is going to panic because he thinks he's been spotted, even though he hasn't, and so he's going to reverse out the bush and get shut down. And that, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, is one of those difference-making plays. That's the kind of like the step up from your 50% win rate to your 52, or your 55 to your 60% win rate, or even try to push it above that, which definitely in the World of Tanks jungle is a very challenging thing to do. It's taking those mechanics, using all of the tools at your disposal, knowing where the enemy vehicles are likely to be, and then confirming it with Sixth Sense and removing the passive scouts with active plays. And active plays played right will always beat passive plays. The issue is can you manage to dictate that combat with the active plays? That is the most important thing to do. And a lot of people always ask me, "Oh, QB, I've got 52% wins. How can I push myself higher?" So I'm derailing the video here a little bit, but anyone in World of Tanks could play incredibly defensively and get themselves to 49 to 52% win rate. Anyone can, if they become a very good player and they know all the mechanics and they manage to just do the hold down thing right and they use their armor well and they shoot well with good aim. However, if you want to be able to push above that, it's not enough now to kind of like sit and wait for your opponents to make mistakes. You're going to have to influence the battle yourself. And sometimes that's taking risks upon your shoulders to be able to take some of the pressure off your team, which is why you see that when I'm playing on Malinovka, I will always take this position. The only issue with this vehicle will be if the enemy team mount an assault to be able to rush you in the dip. But if they do that, then they usually end up in a huge gun line and sacrifice a tank or two. And if that's your kind of like worst possible outcome, then you know you are going to be making some very good profits if that is the worst kind of result that you can have. Now this position is just absolutely amazing at extending vision in towards the enemy's camping area, so to say. You're not going to quite get deep vision down towards the west or manage to spot over this hill and through the bushes up towards the north, but you're going to spot what I call transitional tanks, you know, tanks that are transitioning from one position to another. And sometimes catching your opponents out while they're relocating or deciding that they want to go and pressure another flank instead is when they're going to be at their most vulnerable. And if you can make it tricky for your opponents to relocate and to amass up on a flank, then you will be able to allow your team to push themselves into better positions to be able to create crossfires, to be able to hopefully then choke the enemy out of their defensive plays. Although, when you've already managed to do 5,600 combined in this game and your team is still down by over 2,000 hit points, it's a little bit concerning, especially with very powerful tanks like the Object 752 on top of the hill. And we just got to pray that our artillery is doing some work. And boy, did you see the work that the artillery did earlier? I believe that artillery hit, was it the G-Saw 1008? No, it was the TVP VTU, I believe, the artillery shell. The round from the heavens came in, got rid of the Tier 8 Czechoslovakian medium very early. So the T-54 Lightweight, I love this tank because you can play it in a couple of ways. And I absolutely love two sets of equipment on this vehicle. I really wanted to highlight it as we went into the battle today. Apparently, according to Wargaming, not that many players are making use of two sets of equipment. And as you will have seen from my Masterclass series, that by using two sets of equipment and by making them very different from one another and then targeting different maps with two different types of equipment, it's made a real big impact in my game. I've 3 marked 90%, I think, of the tech tree tier 10 tanks now. Obviously the really hard reward vehicles. No, I don't think I've even got a hope in hell of being able to do something like a 2790 or a 260. But still, it's been really fun the last few years to think about how to min-max the spotting or the tracking and the damage game from that kind of perspective. And my biggest tip to all of you is to make use of those masterclass videos, but also, even if you don't, just use two sets of equipment. I know it can be a little bit expensive, but if you've got a vehicle that you're playing a lot of, just hopefully move a few pieces of equipment onto it using the free demounting kits, or if you're a Watt Plus whale, and it can make the world of difference. And it can also really have that kind of click moment in your mind of where you're not only looking at the enemy's team list at the start of the battle to try and figure out what kind of holes they maybe have in their tank destroyer lineup or their light tank lineup or their medium tank lineup, or what kind of advantages your team will have that you can try and amplify against your opponents. But it'll also mean that you're thinking about the map, thinking about the positions, thinking about what equipment is going to allow you to either get into those positions or once you're there to be able to make use of them. And obviously for a light tank, having the vision system for just demolishing bushes is where it's at. Okay, so at this stage of the game, I just felt that with 6 minutes left, what I like to think in these endgame situations is that you need roughly about 1 minute to do like 1,000 combined as a player. I feel like that is the most that I could be doing in a scenario like this. And so if I see that the opponents have 6,000 hit points left, I definitely need to start making my moves at 6 minutes to have enough time to account for tricky tanks to dig out or a few bad situations. So luckily the exhaust is going to allow us to not get spotted here. And then what I'm doing is I'm making sure that I'm behind the bush here so that he can't see me when I shoot through the bush. And then what you'll see me do is after a couple seconds I'll reverse back, where I know my camera rating has recovered and hopefully be able to spot the pattern. But he actually was hightailing it out of there. But again, that's just huge. Now I've got rid of the pattern who was holding back my vision. And I'm hoping that I can manage to keep them lit up here for my UDES and my K91 PT. And at the moment, I'm having to do the damage myself. Why can't the most accurate tank in the game, the UDES, be able to get a good shot into the M46? But maybe they're worried that they are very low on hit points. And there's still a good gun line on the enemy team. So I'm just trying to poke up, but this is very dangerous. It's cheeky. But remember, again, there's 7,000 hit points left on the enemy team and only 5 minutes to be able to do it. I reckon I get spotted there by the M46 pattern, but wow, I didn't. Looks like my exhaust, maybe the pattern's lack of vision, even though he should have 410 meters base view range, doesn't manage to catch me. Okay, so now that I've managed to get the pattern away from this church or this abbey up here, what that means is that the enemy team have left open another a line of where they don't have vision, where I'm going to be able to try and extend myself into. And that's what you want to do in a light tank. We used our knowledge of bush mechanics there to push the pattern out, and then that's going to allow us in. Luckily for me, we managed to spot the SU-130 PM. Vision system really doing its work there, and it sounds like that K91 PT on our team is firing high explosive rounds. And I'm thinking, do I need to shoot this? Is somebody going to get a shot in? I'm asking the 7032 to come in. And because the SU is moving, that means that his camera rating is going to be significantly reduced, which will allow the K91 PT to be able to get a shot. I'm also asking for the CDA to come in. And I want you to pay attention to the hit points at the top of the of your screen right now. And you can see that we're kind of managing to do about 1,000 a minute. And really, that is something that I've been trying to look into my game recently, is like, when do you have to make the move? How long can you afford to wait for your opponents to make mistakes before then you have to turn the heat up if you still want to win the battle, or even if you're wanting to try and min-max from your marks of excellence perspective? And I feel like about a minute 1,000. Obviously it depends on the tiers. At lower tier it might take you longer because of the amount of the lower damage per minute that you have and also that your allies might have. It also depends on how many tanks you still have in the game. But all I'm saying is that it's very frustrating to see players who don't get stuck in. And then also, come up with a plan. I ask the K91 PT to wait. I say I will kill the 252U first, then I will spot for you. And Major Cobain on our team presses their affirmative key. I'm just wanting him to not get caught right now, because that K91 PT is a linchpin of our team's presence in the western part of this map. They're our only presence. And so I want to let him know, don't get stuck in, just relax. We've got some time. I'll go up on the hill, get rid of the 252U, help to get my eastern team in, and then I'll communicate with Major Cobain again, saying, coming now. He presses affirmative again. Amazing communication from the tier 9 Soviet tank destroyer, who's on 5 kills, having a great game here in a platoon with Major Rosetto as well. I think we seem to... I thought they might be anonymized names, but that'd be a major coincidence if those two majors were anonymized names, right? But I digress. No jokes here. And that's because the Skoda T50 is now managing to get some shots into us. And while we ricocheted a gold round from the M46 pattern earlier, we aren't ricocheting these shells from the Skoda T50. But luckily, the 2 tank destroyers on our team are seemingly annihilating this T30. I take a bit of a risk there to fire, but I knew that the Skoda would also be reloading in this scenario, so it wasn't too much of a risk. And with 2 minutes left on the game, the opponents still have 1,500 hit points that we're going to have to be able to get through. The Conqueror on our team says capture base. No, we don't need to capture the base right now. We need to finish these tanks off shot by shot. And that sweeping flanking play up on the hill, back down into the woods, rocking and rolling, flanking out our opponents. Oh, boys and girls, this game felt really good. And the artillery's putting good shots in. Unfortunately, Major Cobain gets shut down towards the latter part of this round. And that M46 pattern gets shut down by the T54 lightweight. And this one was satisfying. This might as well be World of Tanks 101. Set your tank up correctly. Get yourself into a cheeky position as you can possibly. Use mechanics to completely remove their most important vehicle, the light tank. Then use mechanics once again to push a medium tank out of an important position. Exploit that position. Divide the enemy team. catch the vehicles that are transitioning between the positions, and then use the hole in their defenses to isolate one flank, reinforce with your team, and wipe out the remainers. This was a satisfying game of World of Tanks, and the T-54 Lightweight is an absolute beast for variety inside the game. Not only can you do well on your light tank maps, but yeah, you can go and get brawling on maps like Mines or Himmelsdorf or Rumberg with an aggressive gun ram events build. So an ace tanker here for a whopping 1,777 base experience. Fabulous for a tier 9 vehicle. We get a patrol duty for managing to get 7,600 assistance and 4,000 damage. So we were actually number 1 on damage in a light tank here, in addition to that, which gives us a tank sniper for nailing those targets at long range. And while I fired a good amount of gold rounds, we still make 40,000 credits profit. This was one of those light tank games that you live for. Fair enough, probably the second best map for a light tank, and that's why it made it so sweet to be able to get rid of the WZ-132A on the enemy team, who had actually managed to do 5,500 spotting while sitting in a bush at the start of that battle. But once again, this is something that you will have to master if you want to take your game to the next level, and that is that passive plays will never be as effective as well executed active plays in any situation, and especially World of Tanks. Anyway, ladies and gents, boys and girls, that was it for today. Really hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, give it a thumbs up. If you hated it, give it a thumbs down. And if you're watching this video as it's released on Monday, I'm going live all day on twitch.tv/QuickyBaby with brand new drops tokens. So come along, get some fat loot, and hopefully I'll have a game or two that will never be like this. But we can only pray. Anyway, really looking forward to seeing you all live. And as always, thank you so much for watching. You've been epic, and hopefully I'll see you soon.